In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. About 4 years ago, a female client walked into my office. I had been treating her for alcoholism and other mental health issues for several months. But on that day, she was smiling. She seemed to be progressing well and celebrating her sobriety. And so we scheduled another session for the following week. 2 days later, she committed suicide. I knew she was somewhat depressed and battled several mental health struggles. I was aware that suicide is a possibility for anyone. But I did not, indeed could not predict that she would take her life. No sign, no clue. I was a bit shaken, I suppose, by the thought of the distress of mind, by the profundity of despair that would make her, or anyone for that matter, take his or her life. The Center for Disease Control reported this year that suicide claims a life every 12 minutes in the United States. On June 21st, CNN reported that suicide rates are at its highest in the United States since World War II, noting a 25% increase between 1999 and 2016. But isn't the quality of life supposed to be getting better? You know, we would be naive to underestimate the extent of depression and despair in our society. And so, as I read and contemplated and prayed about the reading from Ecclesiastes this past week, I could not help but think of that client of mine and the many individuals for whom life seems meaningless. And I wonder this morning, what makes life worth living for you, for me? What makes life meaningful? For when at the end of our journey, what would our dash read between the year we were born and the year we will die? What will it say? What meaning will be there? It's a question I ask us to consider because at the heart of Ecclesiastes, the author poses a rather provocative question. Is life really worth living? And if it is, what is the true significance of life? You know, the author wonders if life, with all its complexities, with all its pains and disappointments, its frustrations and contradictions, does it all fit into any meaningful pattern? The teacher, as he identifies himself, throws out a challenge after challenge to the world then and now, to think carefully about what we are doing with our lives. Conliffe, the Hebrew name for Ecclesiastes, invites us to think about the things to which we cling and hold dear to in life, and then to assess, really, are any of them of themselves sufficient to bring us the direction and the meaning and the purpose and the contentment that so many people desperately seek in this world? Well, before we even have a chance to think, the author shares his conclusion with us. At the very beginning of the book, he declares that all of it, absolutely all of it, is meaningless. Vanity of vanities, utterly meaningless. Have you ever felt that way? Ever felt that you're just going through the motion, that life is meaningless? Conliffe uses Hebel, meaninglessness or vanity, more than 30 times in the book to speak to the absurdity and nothingness of life. It is like a puff of wind. It's nothing. So after experimenting and investigating what he calls life under the sun from our reading this morning, Conliffe initially concluded, no, life is not worth living. We live in vain. And he gave 4 arguments to support this conclusion throughout the book. The monotony of life, the vanity of wisdom, the futility of wealth, and the certainty of death. You know, to put this way, the book of Timothy, we brought nothing into this world and will take nothing with us. And so whether he considers his wealth, his works, his wisdom, or his world, Conliffe comes to one sad appraisal. All is vanity and vexation of spirit. But his conclusion is not just anecdotal, dear friends. No, he tests his theory in the nitty-gritty of everyday life, in the experience of life. This is his lived experience. See, although biblical experts are unsure if Solomon is actually the author of this book, Conliffe identifies himself as King Solomon. And what we know about King Solomon is that he had owned everything but realized he possessed nothing. His experience was far greater than anyone in Jerusalem, all Jerusalem, and yet it had been meaningless. He still found himself empty. Wow. See, I've come to realize that people can have everything that life tells you you should have and still be empty inside. I see people on a regular basis who are married but still wake up terribly lonely. People who have everything. I have seen countless emerging adults just this past year, many of whom graduated and are doing well and have a nice, secure job, but are still trying to find purpose and grappling with essence in life. Why am I still feeling so empty or sad, Mario, they ask. We can have everything and still feel empty inside. Solomon led a rich and privileged life, we know, but he found that the inevitability of death made it all meaningless. He noted all the things that money could possibly buy, a great lifestyle and pleasures of all kinds. And what did he discover? He discovered that they may temporarily relieve the symptoms of depression and boredom, but they can never cure an aching heart. He woke up, like many of us will, to the surprising discovery that the things of this world may promise a whole lot, but when it wears off, very little has changed. Even wisdom, which he's known for, that's why it's a part of the wisdom literature, something we should all strive for, he says, it's futile. He agrees that wisdom and education and knowledge help us in life. Yes, they do. And having wisdom is certainly better than being a fool. Would you not say? Yes. But in the end, he says, wisdom and foolery are impacted by the same fate. And what is that fate? Death. The wise and the foolish must die. They do die. And that's the problem. He also examines work. What's the point of it all? He asked in the lesson today. Hard work pays off. Yes, it does. Have you ever heard that? Your parents tell you, work hard, do your best, and it will pay off in the end. And believe you me, it does. But what he says is that even hard work does not satisfy the soul. Because some people work so much that they can't turn it off. They still can't sleep at night. And eventually, all that we have worked for, he says, we have to pass it on to someone else who did not even work for it. Isn't that true? Yes. His point is, keep work in perspective. As one scholar stated, God's intentions for work has become reversed in our world. See, God intended that we work at our worship, enjoy our work, and play at our leisure. Instead, what has happened? We worship our work, enjoy our leisure, and play at our worship. And Solomon is saying we need to keep things in perspective. It seems that Conliffe gives us a picture of unremitting gloom, unrelieved gloom, 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 gloom. He touches our raw nerves and tantalizes us with his brutal honesty. It almost appears as if Conliffe is suffering from a bout of clinical depression when you first read the book, right? And so perhaps rather than being a keen observer of life, I thought maybe he needs a good dose of Prozac or Wellbutrin. But in spite of his painful encounters with the world and its problems, Conliffe does not recommend pessimism or cynicism. What he is admonishing us rather is that we be realistic about life and that we make the most of it because life is short. And so daily, one of my prayers has become that of the psalmist. So teach me, Lord, to number my days. Teach me to embrace every waking moment, to honor you in all that I do. Let your breath become the breath of my breath and your spirit the spirit of my spirit. Solomon, Conliffe, is urging us to become aware, however, that life under the sun is not the whole story. There is optimism. There is a reason this book is included in the Bible because of its wisdom. See, he has found and offers us one piece of true wisdom that we can hold to. For the answer to the apparent meaninglessness in life is to be found in God and God alone. That's the point of his book. See, and whenever we can grasp the centrality and the significance of that relationship, our perspective on life and the things we engage in life will change. But so often, he says, we make the fundamental error of seeking satisfaction in life outside of a relationship with God, who is pictured in Conliffe as above life under the sun. Now, don't get me wrong. Conliffe is not saying don't enjoy life. He's not saying don't work hard. He's not saying don't get rich or eat, drink, and be merry. No, he's not saying any of that. What he is telling us is that the problem is our investment in these things. The belief that we can get out of them more than they can actually give to us. Our problem is that we endeavor to use them to satisfy a hunger and a longing that only God can satisfy. Augustine put it this way: our hearts were made for you, O God, and they will not rest until they rest in you. There is no happiness. There is no deep contentment. There is no deep inner peace and resolve outside of God. That's the grand truth of Ecclesiastes. It's a simple truth, but it's a hard truth for us to get a hold of. A hard truth. As I see the decline in religiosity, as I see the decline in people attending churches, as I note the decline in people who believe that there is a God. You see people's profiles on LinkedIn and other places, and where they don't always note spirituality, but it's often agnostic or atheist. And to each his own. Problem is, we get caught up in the if-onlys in life. You ever suffered from that? The if-only mentality? If only I won the lotto. If only my husband would get a better job. If only Father Mario would preach shorter, we could go by the poolside and enjoy Shirley Temples all day. Right? What is your if only? Conliffe's experience should help us to see the fallacy in the if-only way of thinking. He demonstrates for us the bankruptcy of life without a firm faith in God. And that's the conclusion of Jesus in the gospel reading today. Conliffe, at the end of chapter 2 and therefore chapters 3 to 10, reviews his arguments, the same arguments he made against work and pleasures of all kinds and life. But this time he brought God into the equation, and what a difference the outcome made. By re-examining his impression of life more carefully, he realized that life was not monotonous, but rather filled with challenging situations from God, each in its own time and each for its own purpose. There is a time to be born, a time to die, he says, a time for everything under the heavens. And as for the certainty of death, oh no, there is no way any of us could escape it. It ought to motivate us to enjoy life now and make the most of the opportunities God gives to us. He's saying death is inevitable. The fella tried to cheat death once when death came to visit him. And so he fed death with the most expensive and delicious steaks, etc. And, death fell asleep, as most of us would do after a good meal. And so when he looked at death's list, he saw his name at the top. So he scratched his name off and put it at the bottom. When death woke up, death said to him, "Oh my gosh, that was such a peaceful sleep. You treated me so well." Usually, when I start to take people's life, I start at the top of the list. But you treated me so well, today I'm going to start at the bottom. We cannot escape death. And Conliffe says, therefore, enjoy life now. Make the most of the opportunities God gives to us. Conliffe, as Jesus does in the gospel reading of the rich man, asks us to look up, to look within, to look ahead, and to look around, and to take into consideration time, eternity, death, suffering, and God. And he concludes and invites us to adhere to these principles. 1, life is an adventure, so live by faith in God. Life is a gift from God, so enjoy it. Life is a school, so learn your lessons in it. Life is a stewardship, so have reverence and fear for God. My prayer is that we will take Conliffe's advice and not walk away sad like the rich young man in the gospel reading today. My prayer is that we will learn to pursue not the gifts, but the gift giver. Not that we should not have possessions, but simply don't let our possessions possess us. So my conclusion, my concluding thought, what one simple thing, just what one thing can you do this week in working toward following Conliffe's advice? Let's think about it and let's do it. Life outside of God, he says, ultimately is meaningless.